is a bit of a question and answer session with me and Professor Williams. And then after that, leave, I think it's about 8 o'clock. After that, leave maybe, 20 minutes?
A few minutes on lecture on Shakespeare.
So you can get the original, real Ralph Williams experience that was kind of previewed slightly in the movie. First off, let me say I really like this New Hampshire place.
Yay!
Great crowd, fantastic crowd. Anywhere where the theater manager dresses up in a boa for a Rocky Horror Picture Show is all right by me.
She does it every day.
I thought there was something suspicious about that. So yeah, any questions? And if not, we can get right into the lecture. That's totally cool.
Don't threaten them.
Yes.
How much of that was autobiographical?
There were things that I drew on from my life. Everything except having a really good-looking girlfriend when I was an undergrad. But yeah, I mean, moments were taken from here and there. I definitely used the place and some of my experiences to ground the story. And actually, when I wrote it, I was in Los Angeles, and I had been there for about 3 years. And I was kind of thinking about the move that I had made from Ann Arbor to Los Angeles and kind of questioning that a little bit, wondering about it. And so in a sense, writing the script allowed me to kind of go back and reevaluate some of the decisions that I had made in kind of a fictional way. So there's definitely some things from that. Professor Williams was my professor as an undergrad and also my professor as a grad student when I was his TA. So I definitely, when I started crafting it, I thought to myself, how do I make this as uncliched and as authentic as possible? And then I thought, oh, Professor Williams. What I'll do is I'll kind of model the public persona of the professor after him. And I knew he had experience acting on the stage. And so I thought, I'll write this, and then I'll email him, and I'll get him to do it. And lo and behold, it happened. And I mean, for somebody this is the first time he's ever been on screen before. I mean, pretty excellent performance. We got a really great review from Tom Long of the Detroit News, who is kind of like the film reviewer in the state of Michigan. And my favorite part of it was when he said, first fantastic performance from Professor Ralph Williams, indicating that there were many more to come, I'm sure. Any other questions? Yes?
How much was Professor Williams' own personality reflected after the script was written? Did he come back to you and say, gee, I would do it this way, I would do it that way? Or
Go for it.
Yeah. We had a discussion about it, as a matter of fact. One of the wonderful things about Chris, which is rare in theater, and I suspect is very rare in the film industry as well, is that both as writer and director, he was open to discussion, and if he saw what he thought was a bad idea, he held his ground. If he saw what he thought was a good idea, he adopted it, with no sense of injured integrity on his part. And I think that's rather rare in any field and rather wonderful. And so we worked on the father's role some, and there was a possibility that the father be presented as a total tyrant, and cliched, stereotypical that way. And what we worked out at last was something of what I hope came across, that a rather more widespread experience among parents and children, I have a son myself, 27, is that the parent has such huge hopes and expectations, and in this case, a father who so loves what he does that he can't conceive that his son wouldn't do it. And the son loves Ann Arbor, obviously, uses Trivial Pursuits as a way of escape from the overbearing parental expectations, and finds his love for Ann Arbor and his love for the father, finally, not a trampoline into a new life, but something of a prison. And the story is one, whether he escapes that or not. And I was fascinated in watching the film, Chris, in the way in which you signaled this, in a sense, by his giving up the Trivial Pursuit game at last. He'd broken free. He didn't need it. And I'd love to see a film on the son, Paul Tarson, 5 years later. I wonder what he's going to be doing. It's a fine question. That was the nature of the discussion between us, at any rate.
And it definitely was a challenge in a sense, because on the one hand, you know, it's one thing if you go in and you play somebody who's totally different from yourself. But I was asking him to essentially play a different version of himself. So the public him is definitely very directly based off of the real him. The private him is something completely different. And what was extremely helpful was the fact that you know, he was coming from the vantage point of a father. At this point, no children that I know of. So, you know, it was good to get an insider perspective from somebody who had been there before.
My great fear was that when my son saw the film, he'd say, "Yep, that's exactly what it is."
You ask him yay, nay?
Yay, nay. Good for you. Where was that? Super.
Yeah.
The cast is tremendous. I think everybody played the roles. I mean, how much were the different characters people you grew up with?
What's funny is that, so my the guy who plays Paul's friend, his name in real life is Nelson Franklin. He played James in the movie. That character was based off my cousin, who actually introduced me to pub trivia and uses, I mean, the lexicon at that man's fingertips is astonishing. And actually when I went and played with him pub trivia, one time took out his special pen, and I said, "Why is that special?" And he said, "It's got my name on it." That's exactly what it was. But what's also amazing about the process of creating a film is that because I was basing this off my cousin is like vaguely stocky, shall we say, and about 5'2". So I always just imagined him like that. And then we had Nelson Franklin come in, who's about, I think, 6'4" or so, really incredibly lanky. And as soon as he kind of got into it and was reading that part, it was just like, that's the guy immediately. And he's the only person where I basically said in the room while he was reading for the part, "You are absolutely the person who this is going to be." Anything else? Yes?
How did you create the ICE character, the accountant?
That was kind of, that one was, on the one hand, I would really hate to say that was based on anybody in my life, because that would almost be an insult more than anything else. But on the other hand, that was more just my imagination. What was great was it started out as somebody who was comic relief, but then Evan Jones, who has been in movies like Jarhead, and he probably most famously played Cheddar Bob in 8 Mile, the guy who shoots himself in the leg. He came in and from the beginning took it as kind of like a thing, this is my movie and everybody else are kind of the side characters to me. And really rounded out the character and gave it depth that I had never even thought of beforehand. And the funny thing is, one of my favorite scenes, and certainly my mother's, when he sings Georgie Girl at the end, was initially scripted as him singing the theme song for Laverne and Shirley. Because I was always like, essentially, what the hell are they saying in that theme song? I have no idea. And he actually really got into it, but then, movies being movies, we couldn't license the song. It was too expensive. And I think it worked out much better, because Georgie Girl has that kind of weird, that emotional depth to it and everything. And when he finally got Laverne and Shirley out of his head and latched onto that, it was amazing. And one of my favorite moments, I don't even watch the movie anymore because I've seen it 50 zillion times and I just can't take it. But still, one of my favorite moments is when he goes to light his cigarette afterwards and his hand is actually shaking. Because there's such real emotion there. I just love that. All the way up at the top, yes. Close to the top.
What inspired the creative destruction thesis and that classroom dialogue?
That's a good question. That's the first time anybody's ever asked that. That came from a bunch of different things. I think the reason that the Bible became something important in it was this idea that it played against something trivial. So in other words, if you can imagine somebody studying anything, incredibly significant, to me that's religion and somebody's belief system. And Paul kind of starts out from this place where he kind of doesn't really understand the significance of what he's doing or what he's studying, and hopefully comes to understand that significance over the course of the movie. Originally, I thought that the main story that he would be looking at would be the story of Abraham and Isaac, and when Abraham almost comes close to sacrificing his son. But then when I tried to stick that in there, I was like, that seems a little too dark for the tone that I'm going for. And of course, and then it just hit me, Adam and Eve, and kind of portraying Ann Arbor as his own version of Eden, a place that he kind of needed to escape, but was having a hard time doing. Yeah.
One of the things I noticed in the movie is, he immediately called himself a TA. We have GSIs at the University of Michigan. I didn't know what a TA was until I started my graduate work at another university. So why did you choose to go with a TA as
well,
your
now,
TA?
on the first...
We're TAs. I'm sorry. As a recent Michigan graduate, as the younger generation, maybe you can agree, they're called GSIs, graduate student instructors. We didn't have TAs.
What's really great are all the people who didn't go to Michigan in this crowd and who are just like, can we please get on to something else? So what happened actually while I was an undergrad, I went to undergrad 90 to 94. We have a pretty strong union there, and, 90 to 94, 94 to 98. I've been doing this for so long, I feel like I'm about 72. But anyways, 94 to 98, and during that time, the grad students went on strike for more pay, and they also said, we're actually doing a lot more of the teaching than just being an assistant. So they wanted to be called graduate student instructors. There was a time, however, when people were TAs, and then above and beyond that, if I had the whole GSI thing, I would have needed to put in just a section of dialogue just to explain to non-Michigan people what the GSI was, whereas TA is such a common term. I'm sorry, I'm sure the Michigan people here noticed other discrepancies as well. At least I hope you did. We're lucky that Ashley's didn't complain to us about that, actually. But other things, like, for instance, when they go into the library for Sex and the Stacks, we show them going into Rackham, and not the actual, we show them going into a different building than the library. And the reason is that the building we show them going into, depending on your opinion, is perhaps a little bit more aesthetically noteworthy on the exterior, but also even more than that, we filmed them at a fountain on campus, and to have them point to something, that was the only thing they could really point to, because the other thing was too far away. So it just shows you how much stupid little things you can plan as much as you want. You have no idea. Yes?
The actress that you had for the girlfriend.
Ariel Kebbel.
She seemed much older than a 17 or 18-year-old would come across. And I was wondering, did you have to do that so it would be a more comfortable and attractive relationship? Or was it something that just happened?
It's really interesting because it's so, I feel like something like that is so open for debate. On the one hand, you've got what is considered like a Hollywood freshman. And as far as a Hollywood freshman goes, she's totally a freshman. Now, on the other hand, so in other words, people in Hollywood, they just think, oh yeah, sure, she's 17, 18, whatever, because their perspective is totally skewed. Now, at the same time, we did audition people who were authentically, she was I think 24 when we shot this. We auditioned people who were actually 17 or 18, and it was just like, no. They just didn't have the experience or the confidence to be able to pull it off, and she just won. We actually had one other name actress who really wanted to do the part, but we had made the mistake. When I keep saying we, I mean my brother. My brother produced the movie. He's also the head of the website Funny or Die, which is Will Ferrell's comedy website. So when we were making the decision, we wanted to make sure that we chose somebody based on how good we felt they were, as opposed to what their name was, and she really just nailed it. And I will also say that having now spent time in Ann Arbor, there are definitely moments when I look at people who could be seniors and I think, I cannot believe I ever looked that young. There are other times, I will also say, when I'm like, wow, that person looks like they could be 25 or 26. So I think, I do feel like there's a little bit of leeway there. That's in my, whatever, I'm obviously biased. I will also say, because I know this has come up a fair amount of times, people wonder, how could a freshman ever be in a 400 level class? In the Bible class, as Professor Williams can attest, because that was his course, you got an extremely broad range of people. First off, definitely all different ages. I was a GSI, not a TA. I was GSI for the Bible class. I definitely had a few freshmen sprinkled in there, but also people who were engineers, who were doctors, that kind of thing, because both they loved the professor and also the subject matter was so broad that it appealed to a lot of different people. So that is 100% authentic. Yeah?
I've heard that this is the first time that Michigan allowed their name to be used in all of this, and after seeing the final product, it's really clear that that was a good choice. But
Thanks.
I just love to know a little more about how you sold that in.
I mean, in a sense, it was kind of like what happened with Professor Williams. I wrote it, and I was like, oh, I'll write this at the University of Michigan, and then I'll go take it there, and then they'll let me make a movie. And then only afterwards were people like, how did you get that done? I think we were really fortunate in that they responded really, really well to the script. It helped that I went to Michigan, and my parents went to Michigan, and one of my grandparents went to Michigan. Minor detail. One thing I will say, I never thought they were going to let us do Sex in the Stacks.
Right.
But honest to God, they were totally cool with it, and certainly the guys who ran the library were really into it.
I taught at Michigan all these years, and when that scene came up, I was astonished, and I said to some of my students, there's something in this film which is just impossible, incredible. And they said, you don't know. I learned.
That's great. Yes?
Yeah, it's funny to bring that up, just off of my experience of taking the different tours that the freshmen get when they first come on campus. That whole Sex in the Stacks thing, in my recollection, I thought one of the people who was doing the tour guide said that you actually go into one of the study rooms in the stacks, not necessarily in between the aisles. So that was one
Potato.
minor thing.
That came up in Grand Rapids when a couple in their 60s raised hands and said it was much more comfortable in the Carroll.
Grand Rapids is a city in western Michigan. This is actually true. They came up and really went into much more detail than I actually required. All the way at the top.
Okay. So kind of along the lines of the U of M question, obviously it's set at Michigan, but it must have been so much more difficult to actually film all of those scenes, including the scenes at Ashley's, the Old West Side, and all that. How important was it to you to have sort of the non-actual university scenes filmed there?
Oh, I mean, on the one hand, logistically, when you get a whole crew together and cast and just making schedules work and that kind of thing, you don't, even if we wanted to, we wouldn't have had a choice. But above and beyond that, as far as the story goes, so like I said, I had been in LA for 3 years when I wrote this, and I had tried writing a few different things that were meant much more to be kind of broad and generic and to sell and that kind of thing. And not only was I not selling anything, but I was having a horrible time because I wasn't writing anything that I enjoyed. So I made a very conscious decision to write something that would be personal to both me and to my brother, who's also from Ann Arbor. So that's why it was very important to go back to Ann Arbor. And also, from the position of being a director, having the cast, all the principals except for Professor Williams were not from Ann Arbor. Having the, although all the other people were local actors, having the cast there to kind of soak it up and experience it firsthand was very, very important.
Wasn't that scene in the stadium gorgeous?
Yes.
It's the first time they've allowed the stadium to be filmed during a game.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. Yes, sir.
The film is worthy of...
Oh.
So maybe take this one more question and then make sure we have time for Professor.
And now let me also just say, sorry to cut you. Let me also just say that I think a bunch of us are going back to Barley House after this, where both Professor Williams and I would be very happy to talk to everybody, answer any questions, and also a round of beer on me for anybody who comes back. So please do join us. Yes.
Just real quickly, the film is certainly worthy of wide distribution. Could you share with us how wide a distribution is currently in the works?
This is actually the widest that it's gone, certainly. And so right now we have distribution with an indie company called Rican Hill, and their most recent movie that they put out was something called Hesher, which starred Natalie Portman and what's his name, Joshua Gordon-Levitt, but it's also the same people who put out movies like Memento and Whale Rider, fascinatingly Passion of the Christ. So anyways, they have a very large experience with this. What most movies do, what most independent movies do, is they start out in either New York or LA, probably, I think, because those companies tend to be headquartered there. They go into movies for a week, and they say, okay, if you do well here, we'll take you everywhere else. Generally, they don't, so they don't go anywhere. We wanted to start out in the middle of the country, or in non-big city places, because we felt like our movie not only was based in Michigan, but had a kind of strong Midwestern groundedness to it. So we wanted to start out with what we felt like was our natural audience, in other words, normal, real people. And then if we do well there, Michigan, Ohio, here, then we will go out to New York and LA afterwards.
Good luck.
Thank you. One good thing, we had a great screening up in northern Michigan, Traverse City, and just through that, somebody there had a connection with a chain in Arizona and Southern California who all of a sudden wants to pick us up. So we could very well be in Arizona and Southern California. It's the mystery of independent film. Who knows? As I'm sure you can appreciate. But yeah, let's. This is going to be a treat for me, and I think for everybody, because it's been a while since I've been able to appreciate a Ralph Williams lecture firsthand. So let's get done. Let's get started with Shakespeare, and then hopefully I'll see you guys afterwards at Barley House.